The next part to reviewing linear equations involves looking at types of questions that involve two-step equations. So what I like to think about is if I want to solve a two-step equation, I first want to isolate the variable. And as a reminder, this just means you want to get your letter by itself. And then once you get the letter by itself, so once you've isolated the variable, you're probably going to have to undo some sort of operation. So it might be multiplication. So to undo it, you would divide, or it might be division. So to undo that, you'd multiply. And a reminder, that's called applying the inverse. And then the last little bit is a good idea. You don't have to do this all the time, but you could always check or verify your solution, right? So example one, you'll notice I've already highlighted the variables just to kind of make them pop. So I have 6 times x plus 6 is supposed to equal 12. And again, remember, you could just guess and check, and eventually you would definitely get the answer. But as you move on with your math, the questions are going to get more complicated. So we want to make sure that you have a strong understanding of how to solve these algebraically. So first thing, I need to get the variable by itself. So I'm going to think about this whole term. I want it by itself on the left-hand side. All right, so if I look, I have a plus 6 here. So what I like to think about doing is I imagine picking up this number, moving it across the equal sign, and then what happens, this becomes 6x is equal to 12. Whenever you move a value or a term across an equal sign, the sign has to switch. So that becomes a minus 6. Okay, there's another method that some students prefer for questions like this. So I know that some students like to show that if they want to get rid of this plus 6, the opposite would be to subtract a 6. So they'll actually show that on the left-hand side and then balance that on the right-hand side. Okay, and then they would get 6x is equal to 6. So if this is the method that you were taught and you prefer, totally fine, stick with that. As always, I want you to make sure that you're using whatever strategy makes sense to you. Okay, so back to mine, I would get 6x is equal to 6. And then I'm just going to highlight that variable again to make it pop. Okay, then I'm going to look, well, this is now being multiplied by 6. So to undo that, we practiced this last lesson. I would divide this side by 6, divide that side by 6. These will cancel out. And we would get that x is supposed to have a value of 1. Now, as I mentioned, step 3 there says you could check verify. Again, you don't have to do this every single time, but it's not a bad habit to get into, especially if you're writing like a quiz or a test or something, or if you're at home and for some reason you don't have like an answer key, you can always check or verify whether or not your solution does make sense. So what I'm checking is I just figured out that I think x is supposed to be 1, right? There was our answer. So I'm going to replace this x with 1 and see what happens. So if I go 6 times 1 and if I add 6, I want to determine, do I actually get 12? Okay, well I know this is like 6 plus 6, that's supposed to be 12. Remember, you can't stop here. When you're doing a check, you have to actually show that left-hand side matches right-hand side perfectly. So I would get 12 equals 12, so it looks good. Okay, question B. So this time I have negative 11 is equal to negative 2r minus 7. You'll notice the variables on the right-hand side. It doesn't make a difference which side it's on. Some students prefer to always have the variable on the left-hand side. To me, I just leave it where it is. So this time I need to isolate this term here, so the minus 2r. So what I want to first do is get rid of this minus 7. So I think about if I were to take it and pick it up, if it was minus on the right-hand side, it has to switch to a positive. So I would have negative 11 plus the 7 is equal to minus 2r. Okay, I'll clean this up. Well, minus 11 plus 7 is minus 4. And I'll make that variable pop again. Then hopefully I notice, well, this question right here is what we already practiced. So I'm going to undo the multiplication. I'm going to divide this side, include the sign, divide by negative 2, balance it out, divide this side by negative 2. These will cancel, and you will get that 2 is equal to r. All right, question C. So we have negative 2n minus a negative 3 is equal to 17. I included this question just to show you. So if you're ever given something that looks a little bit wonky like this, where you're subtracting a negative, don't forget when you subtract a negative, that's really like you just having plus 3. So I would just rewrite it as a plus 3 right off the hop. Okay, and then I want to look. So here's my term with the variable. I want to get it by itself. So to do that, I'm going to think about how do I get rid of this plus 3? Well, I like to think about like kicking it over to the other side. It's going to switch to a negative. So I'll have negative 2n is equal to 17 minus 3. Clean stuff up. 17 minus 3 will give you 14. And then in order to solve for n, I'm going to divide both sides by negative 2. Left-hand side will cancel out, and I will get n is equal to negative 7. Moving on to example 2. So you'll notice this one involves division. So this time there's a division happening, so we're going to have to undo that division at some point. But we're going to start the exact same way. So you want to get the term with the variable by itself first. So I'll notice here is my term with the variable. Okay, so this p divided by 2. So I want to get rid of this negative 1. So I'm going to think of moving it over. The sign has to change. If you want to show the fact that you're adding 1 on both sides, go right ahead. So I just show it as 18 and then plus the 1. Okay, well that's going to give me p divided by 2 is supposed to equal 19. Okay, well hopefully you realize right here, again, those were questions that we practiced last lesson. Right? So this time, if you are dividing it by 2, to undo that division by 2, I'm going to multiply this side by 2. These will cancel out. Whatever you do to one side, you have to balance on your equation. So times that by 2. And we would say that p is equal to 38. Again, you could always check verify. So let's check verify one of these types of questions. If I want to check or verify it, what I'm doing is I'm checking, is p actually equal to 38? So this p, I'm going to replace it with 38, and then check, well, if I divide that by 2, and then if I subtract 1, do I actually get 18? So 38 divided by 2 is 19. If I subtract 1, am I going to get 18? Don't stop there. You have to actually show left-hand side matches right-hand side perfectly. And I'll notice 18 does equal 18. So that is the correct solution. Next question, you'll notice this is a bit different. The variable is now negative. So it's negative x divided by 12, and then I'm subtracting 6, and I'm supposed to get 4. So I know that whatever term has the variable, I want it by itself first. So this negative 6, I'm going to push it over to the other side. That will give me negative x divided by 12 is equal to 4. As soon as I move across the equal sign, the sign has to change. That becomes a plus 6. Okay, well that means I have minus x divided by 12 is equal to 10. All right, I'm going to think about how do I get rid of this division by 12? Well, I can multiply this side by 12. These will cancel out, but then you got to balance on the other side. So then we would get negative x is equal to 120. Okay, but be careful, this actually isn't your final answer. So you're not going to say that x is 120 because that's not x, that's negative x. So remember, it's like there's a negative 1 here. So then to get rid of that, I have to do an additional step where I'll divide out the negative. So I can divide both sides by negative 1. So then our answer for this one is actually negative 120. And then last question. So again, a bit different. This time the negative's on the bottom in your denominator. So I need this term by itself to begin with. I'm going to move this 7 over here. So the 9 stayed. The 7 was positive. It becomes a minus when I move it across the equal sign. Clean stuff up. You'll get 2 is equal to x over negative 4. And then this time I'm dividing by negative 4. So to undo that, I can multiply this side by negative 4. This will cancel out. Balance though, multiply this side by negative 4. So you would get negative 8 is supposed to be x. All right, time to practice some 2 sheets again. What I want you to do is focus on the odds. Missing an S there, sorry. So the first sheet are questions similar to example 1. So make sure you have your notes handy to help you out, or keep this video open to help you out. And then the second sheet are questions similar to example 2. So try the odds first. Again, if you want more practice, finish the evens. If you have questions, let me know. And at the end, let me know, how did you make out? Are you good to go? Are you so-so? Or do you need additional support? And have a fantastic day.